This is Taya reporting for the Real News Network in Salisbury, Maryland. The long process of reforming the troubled Baltimore City Police Department may have been dealt a serious setback. The Trump administration filed a motion seeking to delay a critical hearing regarding the consent decree between the Department of Justice and the Baltimore Police Department. The decree was negotiated after a scathing Justice Department report found Baltimore police engaged in unconstitutional police practices and racist tactics. Currently, the preliminary agreement is in front of a federal judge who had scheduled a hearing to accommodate public input this week. But in court filings yesterday, Department of Justice lawyers cited a new emphasis on law and order and crime fighting in the Trump administration as the reason the department needed to review the decree. Attorneys noted that Trump had instructed the Department of Justice to focus on the surge of violence in cities like Baltimore and wanted to make sure that the consent decree promoted these new principles. Here to discuss the implications is investigative reporter Janis. So, Stephen, can you tell me about the consent decree and how we got here?
Well, as you said before, the Justice Department issued a very critical report of the Baltimore City Police Department finding unconstitutional practices and racist policies. And so out of that came a consent decree that was hastily negotiated between the Department of Justice under the Obama administration and City of Baltimore and filed with the federal court quickly just before Donald Trump was inaugurated, as many city officials said, and as the federal government said, or the Justice Department, that they need to do this because it wouldn't be done under the Trump administration. And so that process had been moving forward, and what we were expecting was a hearing this week where people from the public or citizens could give input about what they wanted to see in this decree. The decree itself is pretty complex. It includes a multitude array of changes, notably some changes in training, but even more important, changes in the type of arrests that police can make. In other words, the police could not, for example, arrest someone for petty offenses without getting approval from a supervisor. So it was a very extensive overhaul of the police department, which now is in jeopardy.
So what did the filing say about President Trump's intentions?
It said that the Trump administration was concerned about law and order, was concerned about that violent crime was out of control, that somehow the police department would be hampered, I think it was implying. In other words, that this consent decree and the 25 or other consent decrees that are currently operational around the country were somehow inhibiting, and that they had to look at the new policy that Trump had promulgated through his executive orders and see if it was applicable to the or at least was being assisted by these consent decrees. And it's interesting that the Trump Justice Department would choose this particular vehicle as a way to gauge whether or not the federal government was helping out in the crime fighting effort. So that's basically what they were saying. I mean, they literally said law and order in the actual order itself.
But this isn't limited to just Baltimore, right?
No, this review is nationwide. It's going to there are consent decrees in place across the country. There was one just recently negotiated with the Chicago Police Department, which will also be reconsidered. And there are consent decrees that have been operational for years in cities like Cleveland that will also be under review. So it's possible that the Justice Department could decide to roll back all of these. I mean, I talked to a lawyer last night to find out what actually could happen if the Trump Justice Department, ultimately, if the judge approves this consent decree, the Justice Department and the City of Baltimore and other cities have to sign off. If the Trump Justice Department doesn't want to sign off on it, then these things basically die out. I mean, there's really no way to move forward without some participation by the Department of Justice, and it really seems to me reading that statement, that actual motion to delay, that the Justice Department is not interested in these types of agreements.
Seems like a lot of fears are coming true.
Yeah, a lot of people had said this before, that this was going to be sort of the end. The Obama administration tripled the amount of Justice Department investigations into police departments, and it looks like, this is not going to be a policy, despite the fact that the findings of the Justice Department the Baltimore City Police Department and other departments were completely unconstitutional, which is really interesting that the Trump administration is, who, would I think argue sometimes they're strict constitutionalists. Well, they're not. Because these policies were unconstitutional, so it's just hard to understand.
So what can the city do? Is the consent decree critical to reforming the police department?
Well, here is a big misnomer about this. The Baltimore City government, Mayor Catherine Pugh, the city council, has all the power in the world to execute these reforms. They do not need the federal government. They don't need a federal consent decree. I mean, the misapprehension of this problem, that somehow there is no way that a city government can control its police department, is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the mayor, for one, can defund. The mayor can order the commissioner to promulgate new orders, which orders, would tell the police not to make arrests without consulting a supervisor. All the things that are in this, training, everything, can be done by the Baltimore City Police, by the Baltimore City government. I mean, it's kind of absurd. I think what you're seeing here and why these cities have turned to the federal government is because of the power of the police unions. because the FOP pretty much has negotiated a contract, as the mayor admitted to us in an interview, where they could not really schedule officers the way they want to schedule. And we have witnessed in the legislative process the Fraternal Order Police interfering with a very minimal change that the city wanted in terms of having a civilian on an internal disciplinary board. Right. So, this shows that the police unions, I believe, and we have asked the mayor this question, are kind of running the city, or at least running the department, because everything in that consent decree is absolutely within the purview of the power of the mayor. The mayor controls the purse strings, the mayor controls the police commissioner, the city council controls the purse strings. They can all undo that. They can all implement these changes if they want. And I think we have to think from a local perspective, in many of these cities, if the Trump administration is not going to step in, then these cities have to do their job and manage their police departments. And if they don't do that, nothing is going to change.
This is Taya and Stephen Janis reporting for the Real News Network in Salisbury, Maryland.